in print, on air and on the web. This is International Correspondents. Hello, I'm Fanula Sweeney. Coming up, informing Iran, the challenges for stations broadcasting into the country post-election.
This is extraordinary.
How the story changed. Foreign journalists face tough reporting restrictions in the wake of the ballot. And the media and Michael Jackson, the news phenomenon surrounding the life and death of the King of Pop. It was an election with plenty of news interest, but it was the aftermath of Iran's June 12th vote when the story really gained momentum. As protesters took to the streets, the Iranian authorities imposed restrictions on reporters. How Farsi language broadcasters covered the story presented some difficulties too, as we found out.
3, 2, 1, cut Crusader.
From a studio in London, the news team prepares to go to air at the BBC's Persian television service. The TV service has been on air since January, broadcasting 8 hours a day to Persian speakers in Iran, Afghanistan, Tajikistan and elsewhere around the globe. Lately, like most news outlets, it's been following the fallout from Iran's disputed presidential election on June 12th.
The big challenge for us is that we're not able to report on the ground in Iran in Farsi. We can't send our own reporters in to report the news in Farsi, although the BBC does have a BBC News English language bureau in Tehran. But for us, there have been tens of thousands of news gatherers on the ground with mobile phones, with stills cameras, and we've relied on that. We haven't thrown open the channel solely to them. We've put context and analysis around it, but it's meant that we have been able to rely on information from them on days when we weren't getting it from any other source.
BBC's Persian television estimates it has an audience of up to 8 million people. It says it and other Farsi language services have proved to be an invaluable source for people inside Iran trying to get information about the country's political situation. Puna Gaddousi presents BBC Persian Television's interactive programme and says the station would not have been able to cover the elections and its aftermath without that citizen journalist component.
There came a point when, instead of an interactive programme which only discusses people's opinions and talks to people and gets the view from the citizen's point of view, we became a news gathering sort of a hub for the rest of the BBC. Without even realizing in the first week, because we were inundated with emails and messages from people inside Iran, eyewitnesses, with user-generated material that they sent for us.
Stand by.
Across the Atlantic, the Washington, D.C.-based Voice of America expanded its programming in the wake of the elections. Satara Dekashesh is among the broadcasters on VOA's Persian News Network.
You need to remind yourself constantly that it's not something personal.
Iranian-American staffer Vafa Mostagim says he knows firsthand what it's like not to get the real story inside Iran.
We don't make a decision for them, we just provide the information for them. So they're not getting it from their media. That's why they're tuning to VOA.
In the post-election crisis, VOA says traffic to its website expanded 200%, with an avalanche of videos and pictures.
It is an incredible volume, and right now our challenge is to just keep up with it and making sure we're putting the best stuff on air.
Like the BBC Persian service, which is funded by the British government, Voice of America is financially backed by the US taxpayer. VOA's charter calls for presenting US policies clearly and effectively. Though VOA executive editor Steve Redditch, a longtime journalist and former CNN producer, says VOA strives to present all sides.
There's always a danger in any operation in showing any kind of bias. That's something that we're vigilant about all the time.
Inside Iran, viewers saw a different side of the story in the days after the election. The government-run IRINN sent its reporter on a fact-finding mission around Tehran. Her interviewees, without exception, offering reassuring reaction about the situation. At one point, Iranian officials accused the Western media of stoking up trouble.
We've had accusations of bias from the government in Iran, but also from opposition people who say we should be taking one side or another. Well, the BBC doesn't take sides, and nor indeed does CNN, I'm sure, but we have to be able to give the context, and we're not giving commentary or bias, but we are giving the context so that we are putting both sides of the argument.
With so many Iranians working here, it must be emotionally challenging for them.
Many of them have got close friends and family back in Iran. Many of them lived there until a year ago, and they've all managed to put their opinions and their views on the coke peg when they come into work and behave completely professionally. It's been a learning experience for everybody here, and I think they've come through better journalists, but they were very strong journalists to start with.
Amir Azimi is head of planning and production with BBC Persian Television and coordinated the station's coverage of the Iranian elections.
From a professional point of view, it is very exciting to working on a bigger story. From a personal point of view, yes, it is my country. I've been born there, I've grown up in there, and I've worked in there as a journalist. So I'm quite used to work on Iranian bigger stories and not to get involved personally, because even before I joined the BBC, I was a journalist in Iran working in the media and covering all sorts of stories.
As international journalists were subject to strict guidelines in the weeks after the election, limiting what they could report, news services also had to change how they reported the story. At the interactive desk in London, Puna Godusi says it's become dangerous for people inside Iran to share their views.
Most of the people are calling from overseas now. Most of the people from Iran are just sending us their numbers and we're calling them. It's become a security situation as well. More and more people are not feeling comfortable enough to come on air with their true names or with their true faces, because we used to have webcam participants in the show as well.
Challenging times for journalists and news organisations to report a story. Increasingly, user-generated content is proving a crucial component of news coverage when the journalists themselves are unable to report firsthand. A glimpse on how stations broadcasting into Iran are covering the post-election fallout. When we come back, on-the-ground reporting and a closer look at the difficulties for foreign journalists covering the story.